Okay, so I begin. Mark Foster Gage, he's 47 years old today, and we wish him a happy birthday. He's a very passionate architect. I watched a discussion he had with Patrick Schumacher that was quite temperamental, and I liked it. Both of them actually were quite passionate and temperamental. He's also a tenured assistant professor at Yale University, where he taught from 2001, so for 19 years. Not a little thing. Okay, so this is a book, the cover of a book he just published by Rizzoli, Mark Foster Gage, Projects and Provocations. I don't know very well about the subtitle. You know, maybe another possible subtitle, maybe even more appropriate, could have been Projects as Provocations. Like this, it seems that the projects are not provocative and the provocations are not projects. Anyway, this is just, I guess, linguistics. Here you see on the right a fragment of a skyscraper he proposed for Manhattan, and we'll arrive at it in more detail. And here is, you know, a fragment of that cover page that shows, you know, Manhattan and a lot of sky. I kind of like this image. And then a solitary man there on the balcony of his proposal, contemplating the work of man, Anthropocene, the age of Anthropocene. Here is the gentleman. He looks a little bit like Van Gogh, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know why I'm thinking. I mean, I do know why. Anyway, I found this image on the web, so I put it here with the you know, Manhattan and one of his proposals. He's a very articulate architect, and as I said, very, very passionate. Here he is at this famous series of conferences, and you know, he's very engaged and very engaging. Okay, so now we'll look through some of his works. But first I start because on his website, I discovered that he designed an outfit for Lady Gaga. And since myself, I had a certain, you know, interest in Lady Gaga when I launched two competitions, a house for Lady Gaga and a house for not Lady Gaga. So I was interested in this outfit for Lady Gaga that he did. You know, there are renderings, you know, images that he created. I think he's fascinated by some kind of and maybe insufficiently recognized meeting between the sacred and the profane. Because even Lady Gaga, I think, has a side. She portrays herself sometimes as a sinner, sometimes as a nun, or sometimes as both. So I think she herself has this duality built in, and it's possible that Mark Foster Gage, if he doesn't identify with it, maybe he sympathizes with it. But I also think maybe I make an unwarranted statement now. I think he also indirectly and sporadically is concerned. There seems to be some concern with the afterlife, with death. I mean, this, you know, and I know what I'm saying is a little bit maybe strange because, you know, we are talking about fashion, we are talking about Lady Gaga, but look at these faces. And you will see other works where I seem he's maybe more than most North Americans, he does have a certain relationship, if I can call it so, with what we call death. But on the other hand, of course, he's attracted by sensuality, and you know, Lady Gaga stands tall in that field. although, as I said, Lady Gaga, in my opinion, also has a duality. And, you know, these images that Mark created are, you know, I would say they are rather ambiguous. You know, you know, they seem to celebrate movement and sensuality and flamboyance, but because of the actually lack of colors or a very discrete, you know, shades, there seems to be also some kind of a negation of what sensuality and fashion seems to be. And even here, it's an aspiration, I think, on one hand towards ethereal spaces, but and even here, you know, is a human being who is, you know, transporting us and transporting herself into a realm that, through the gesture of her white arm, seems to be connected with the beyond, if not the beyond itself. So I believe, you know, I'm trying to be an amateur psychoanalyst. I believe Mark Foster Gage is has a certain aspiration or longing for the otherness of either what death means or the beyond means, or you know, even some kind of a purity, you know. Anyway, these are just approximation from my side. I didn't, you know, study him so very carefully. It's in a way a first reaction, but it's a felt reaction, and it seems to be confirmed somehow by contemplating the other works he did. He is obviously also fascinated by Lady Gaga, maybe by the eternal feminine, and of course he was not, and he's not the only one. Now this picture is, you know, kind of strange. It's on his website. You know, there is a man. Is it Jimi Hendrix there on the cover of Lady Gaga? Then I look at the man, a masculine face on the right. You know, he has a strange expression. Anyway, maybe there isn't a great symbolism in this picture. Now, a house he did for someone, I guess, in France. The name seems to be French, and it's a project, of course. In fact, I don't show maybe just one work that was built, but when I look at this project, what do I see? You know, it's an idealized nature, but idealized at the level of Lilith, not of Eva. This is not a domesticated nature. This is a wild nature. This is the nature before. This is nature before the fall of man, in a way. And this nature attacks the building. On the other hand, the building is not very reticent or very modest. You know, it's kind of interesting. Of course, it's a rendering, but this rendering says something about his obsessions, about the architecture he tries to achieve. And you know, where are the highways? Where are the busy highways? We just see these wild landscapes, and then we see, you know, this architectural, you know, I don't know how to call it, architectural product, architectural proposal, architectural sculptural architecture. Whatever it is you know, the result of his imagining in approximately architectural terms. We'll see also later on a project that was done at Harvard by students, and I couldn't verify. I tried today to verify if indeed he was the instructor, but I think it was, because he's very much in the spirit of what we see here. But somehow Sucker Punch Daily didn't open today. I couldn't access it today. Anyway, but what do we see here? You know, it's a heroic interior. It's a heroic architecture, but it also has historicisms. You see here a fragment of a you know, almost like a framing, you know, a gilded frame you know, of a large artwork, let's say a painting by Rubens, which is, you know, incorporated in this cave-like cubistic interior. And so the same here, you know, he has this liking for golden, you know, fragments, and also I could almost approximate something like, you know, some kind of a cultural primitivism or cultured primitivism, which is an oxymoron, of course, but there is something like this, I think, in his architecture. He's a very, you know, cultured man. You know, not architects are like this, but he is. Anyway, this is the plan of this cultured cave. But it was not built yet. Yes, this work is somehow part of what I called not too long ago the cave revival. The words are not mine, they belong to a doctoral student here, but they are amusing, these words, the cave revival. We arrived at the cave revival. Now, this is a store in Tokyo and Sao Paulo. He worked, he did several works for Nicola Formichetti store. And here he is getting very sincere, so to speak. In other words, because it's just a project, you know, he proposes, you know, wild sceneries, some kind of a psychedelic interior, but then there are these sculptural, you know, crystallizations which are I don't know, both comical and grotesque, and you wonder, you know, you wonder. Also, they seem to relate to contemporary visual culture, robots, you know, Disney to an extent, and it's kind of strange, the meeting between, you know, it is the world of fantasy. We see those wings, there are wings everywhere, and those appear in other works he has. I'm not very convinced about this tendency to relate to a visual culture that I would say expresses the superficiality of our times. You know, there is an invocation here even of the Pietà. Well, you know, I don't know in what way we can relate these images with Pietà. But
Dan?
Yes?
Is this in Tokyo? Is the Tokyo shop?
Well, I don't know if it was built. I don't think it was built. But
no, but is this in Japan? Because there is a pop artist, his name is Takashi Murakami, and if you look at these works of his, it bears some resemblance.
I think, thank you, Florian. I think it was proposed for both New York and Tokyo. Now, I don't know if the same project was done for both locations or this one for Tokyo. I don't know. But I will check if you are so kind to write his name, because I didn't memorize it on chat. So later on, I could look at it. Thank you. But you see here, you know, the reference to European, you know, art, and that is Renaissance art of the highest order. So we wonder, what is the relationship between what is on the left to what is on the right? A question. I launched a question. Okay, but again, there are, as I said, the insinuations of a possible psychedelic world here. He seems to be, in a way, awkward. I mean, he uses digital technology, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he himself does some of these things or he has people in his office that produce them. Anyway, they obviously represent him. That's why they are on his website. Now we see a work done kind of similar to what we saw earlier. I mean, we just saw part of his Yale seminar research, and we see the same kind of aggregate or aggregated, sculptures where there is this, conjunction of various faces, vegetal elements, animal fragments, human. You see a human face. You see it's. I know on let's say on ancient temples, like from Hindu temples, this was done frequently, but there was a narration there that was connected, I believe, to the faith of the people who built them and sculpted them. But what do we do today? Because we don't have what was called a shared symbolic order, so we just fantasize, but in the absence of a shared symbolic order, and that is a legitimate language that can be understood, a narration that could be understood by others, we can only approximate. But these are 3D printed, and these were done, by his students under his guidance at Yale, and that's why I thought of also talking about Michael Hansmeyer, who at ETH in Zurich, he does approximately similar things with his students or without his students. Anyway, here is the machine laboring for externalizing the visions of his students and himself, and it moves me in a way. This submission of the machine to the whims of the human imagination. The machine, loyally activates its power in order to create what the artist or the architect is envisioning. Here you see a fragment of a larger structure, if I can call it so, but it's certainly an ornamental structure. It's not just a structure. And just like in the case of Patrick Schumacher, with whom he had that very tumultuous dialogue on YouTube, and I really suggest to you to watch it, because I think they are both admirable because of their passion in defending themselves, and there is conflict as well. Anyway, Patrick Schumacher also advocates the cause of a structure that is ornament and an ornament that is structural. So the conjunction and the simultaneity of structure and ornament, this I see also in the case of Mark Foster Gage. Here are the proud students, but I didn't expect the robot to be so impressive. I mean, it is quite a large machine. Anyway, they can do it at Yale, of course. And I wonder what Louis Kahn would have thought about this when he taught here, 50 years ago in this school. I wonder what he would have thought. He probably would have embraced the technology. I can't imagine him turning his back on anything that was interesting and new. And although in the case of Louis Kahn, his friend, the historian, the famous historian who taught at Yale as well, Vincent Scully, said that in the case of Louis Kahn, there was the light of a laser or a laser beam and the light of a candle. So it was both. And so Louis Kahn was interested in the latest, but he also had his head turned backwards, significantly. He did both, and I think Louis Kahn assimilated history very convincingly, much more than most architects in his time. Now we go to his proposal, this outrageous proposal for the Helsinki Guggenheim Museum. And it's actually interesting that today I will also show 3 works where ELISSA Aalto collaborated with her husband, also built in Finland. Well, built in Finland. This one was not built. But it's such a distance. This proposal was done approximately half a century or 50 years after the Aalto family built what they built. But when you look at it, their visions, are outrageously, radically different from what Alvar and ELISSA Aalto worked on. Now, I believe that what Gage did was one of the most radical proposals sent to Helsinki. And you see the relationship with what I already showed, but it was an outrageous proposal, and it does fascinate me for that, because it's a kind of architecture that makes one mad. I mean, the only equivalent I found is in some ancient temples, but here I also see, Hieronymus Bosch on the left, and there are exoticisms that refer to the complexities of our world, and the encyclopedic knowledge that apparently we arrived at, but without perhaps the necessary depth. So anyway, there is also symmetry. There are clothes here of some animals and monsters. Actually, the building you see when it touches the ground, or I don't know, it touches a slab, a horizontal surface, the structure becomes close. And it is, an implicit and explicit quest for an architecture that go beyond its usual limits. Sculpture, again, it becomes fundamental, just like in the Hindu temples that I mentioned before. This is, well, the plan in itself is not complicated. What is so-called complicated is what is happening at the periphery, which is, almost some kind of an imago mundi in all its madness. Otherwise, and this is another aspect of his architecture, it's in its essence is kind of Beaux-Arts. I mean, it's symmetrical. If you make abstraction of the sculptures, you have symmetry. You have left and the right side. You have in the center what we see here. So it's an almost Beaux-Arts architecture. But what is unique is this multitude of grotesque, externalizations at the periphery of the building. Pardon, I hear someone wants to say something.
Yeah, me again. I will send you another link which you should maybe check out in correlation to this one. This is a Bandung artist. His name is Nuarta, and he made a super massive Hindu-like sculpture on Bali, which you can walk. It's really impressive. It's all made by fiberglass and has also this highly complex geometry, this mixture between building and sculpture. I will send you a couple of links. I think it's also a very interesting reference when looking at this one here.
Thank you very much, Florian. Thank you. Well, try to imagine if you eliminate the sculptural parts of the building, what do you get? You know, you could get many things. A brutalist building, you know, even a, I mean, you know, you have those cantilever parts, but otherwise it's a symmetrical building, schematically, you know, designed. Fortunately and unfortunately at the same time, it is animated by this unbelievable sculptural mess that he covers the building with. And it is impressive, this section. I mean, you know, of course, the minimalist and the timid and the functionalist would vehemently protest. But I think if it was built, we would all be now in Helsinki to wander around it, because it would not leave us indifferent. No, no way. Anyway, but I don't know about this. You know, on one hand, there is even some kind of a morbidity, but then there is the other side where you have this joyous, almost 60s yellow submarine Beatles aesthetics, you know, and I wonder, you know, he didn't make up his mind, or because yes, there are different things going on here, or maybe he just explored various ways. In a certain way, he does say something about our world. You know, it's a mammoth, you know, activity in the world. It is, you know, a lot of hybridity. We are all together in it, you know, on this planet, as we call it, and you know, anything goes. But I don't know. I mean, I'm still asking, what would I think if this building was built? Anyway, on the other hand, this image I also found on his website, and it's mysterious, and it's, you know, it's, you know, I don't think it's an accident that this image is on his website. It is a reminder of what, I know I express myself maybe questionably, a reminder of what might happen or what might follow. The silhouette of the building through the fog, you know, seen from a distance, is somehow like a mysterious, you know, silhouette, maybe of some Oriental origin, or I don't know. But I see here also something maybe slightly or not so slightly pessimistic or apocalyptical even. Now we come back to fashion, because what can we do? You know, the fashion store seems to do well enough to allow for experiments, like Prada allowed for Rem Koolhaas and Nicola Formichetti for Mr. Gage. I think this one was built, and look at it. You know, I don't know very well what to think about this. In a way, I like what I see. But on the other hand, I regret that it's just that, a fashion store, you know. I would have liked it to be something else, you know. But it's interesting that here the fashion looks more timid and, you know, restrained than the architecture. Look at those T-shirts or whatever they are, and even the figures in the front. The architecture is more wild than the clothing. And this is not easy to do, but he did. But the frontier between the real, and the unreal is so thin that I still don't know, was it built or not? I think this one was built, but I'm not sure, because, you know, today you can make renderings so accurate that you can swear it is the real thing, but it's just a rendering. On the other hand, maybe even a good rendering has a certain level of reality. Like Picasso said, anything that can be imagined is real. I don't know about what Picasso said, but he did say this. Anyway, it's an interesting interior, because it's some kind of a geometrized, you know, cave-like, hypnotic, you know, interior where you know, there are endless reflections and mirrors, and it's confusing, but it's confusing in a inciting way. The psychedelic, you know, atmosphere is present. And then, of course, references to a certain visual culture, you know, science fiction movies, and so on. We live in a complicated world, you know very well. We have our TVs with countless channels, with countless programs, with countless films. And so the insinuations of the unreal into the real are very, very persistent. And, you know, this could create easily some confusions with a plural. Anyway, so on the other hand, a while ago, I made a presentation about architecture and fashion. And yeah, it seems that the world of fashion is quite connected, even with a repository of the real that architecture was supposed to be, at least these days. Here he also worked on the fabrication or the possible fabrication of these things. So he went further than in some other projects. And I like this crystal-like, you know, skin of what he imagined, you know. But it was used also by Rem Koolhaas in his latest building in Berlin, and other architects, of course. And maybe it was used even in the Middle Ages in a certain way, in the structure of the ceilings in some cathedrals. It's nothing really so new. But this project that I will present now, I think I have something to say about it. First of all, why would he be interested in designing a mausoleum or a monument to cars? Because this is what it is. I mean, you know, in a way, it's unbelievable. You know, here you have truly the mausoleum of cars. You know, it's like the pharaoh, the car, in multiplied ad infinitum. And it's this monument dedicated to cars. I'm not sure if he's critical of cars or not, because I could read this project as some kind of a sarcastic, you know, statement about, you know, the king of the roads, and not only of the roads. And what do you do today, you know, at a time when we talk about sustainability, the rising level of the seas, the pollution, and all kinds of problems, in which the car is definitely present, if not the cause. I see some kind of memento mori here. You know, it's a monument. Maybe it's a monument to cars, or for cars, after the death of the car. He's a cultured man, Mark Foster Gage. I have difficulties to imagine. I mean, yes, he's a North American, but I have a feeling he cannot be too sympathetic towards cars. Although here he dedicated a whole monument to them, you know, and what a monument, you know. I mean, so I don't know. I don't know if there was a program. He did it just from his own imagination for himself. But the idea to populate a vertical monument with cars is, you know, at least curious. And also, let's contemplate the landscape. The context is just desert. It's just desert, you know. So dunes, in fact. So it makes us think. In this sense, this work is indeed a provocation, and I think we should think about it. I also believe in the possibility of a sarcastic architecture. I think the architect, if he or she has something to say sarcastically, perhaps he or she can do it well, with some limitations, because certain so-called clients might notice and protest, but maybe not all of them. Like, for example, Goya represented himself in some paintings where he showed the royal family, and he didn't depict them very flattering in a very flattering way, and still he was there, identifiable in the corner of the painting, the author of the sarcasm. Maybe the architect, to an extent, can do this too. I think the idea of a sarcastic architecture towards negative aspects of society or politics or whatever could be, to use a word Ginny Gang used, actionable. She talks about actionable idealism, meaning an idealism which is feasible. But the word actionable is, I never encountered it before until I read it in one of her statements. Anyway, so this is the monument to to the real god of modernity, which is the car. Interesting project. I mean, look at this, and then look at this. The cars are stepping in. Okay, now a concert hall when was it? Where was it done? In Latvia, I think. Project. I think he does a lot of competitions. With this kind of work, I cannot imagine a lot of so-called beneficiaries or clients knocking at his door. But even the projects, I think, have a meaning, have a role, and as such, they could be important. Well, this is more so-called, it could be built, and without maybe too many protests. He gave up on those sculptures in this project. There is a distance between this project and his proposal for Helsinki, no doubt. Maybe certain people told him, please abstain yourself. Although here and there are, fragments at least that connect with that proposal in Helsinki. Now, a Metropol Hotel, it's almost like in a Hollywood movie, I almost see here, Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman, the Metropol Hotel, the very name, Metropol Hotel. And look what he proposed, glamour and some kind of a bitter sweetness also. I have a feeling I see here, the touristic adventure ending up in some kind of, desolation. I don't know. I don't see a lot of, optimism actually, despite the richness and so on. This facade of this building makes me go on the other side of the street actually, and appreciate even more the buildings left and right for some reason. I have a feeling Mark Foster Gage is rather, skeptical about the human condition, and he moves on, but I don't think he has great illusions about the human condition. I could be wrong. Anyway, this is the plan. You see, whether the international style architect or the functionalist or in general the modernist would have used straight lines, he fragments them, you know, as there are you know, impediments on the way. You know, it's not a straight corridor, although conceptually that's what it is. But look at the walls, you know, and yeah, this is the main facade, the one that we saw adorned with those, you know, that myriad of sculptural forms. Otherwise, yeah, it's a hotel, you know. National Center for Science and Innovation of Lithuania. I think that the previous project might have been also for Lithuania, not Latvia, as I said. Sorry, but I'm surprised I didn't mention it. Now, this work is almost a typical Mark Foster Gage, and I discovered a project done at Harvard, and my intuition is that it was done with him as instructor, kind of similar with what we see here. You know, it is an interesting architecture. It has Beaux-Arts compositional elements, but a certain monumentalism that also has exotic parts, maybe from Mesoamerica or from, I don't know. There seem to be certain influences here that do not come from the United States per se or Europe per se. No, they come from other cultures. And it's a fantastic architecture in a way. You know, it's possible that it could be built, but I don't know. I mean, someone has to invest in these lavished, you know, workings of flamboyant imagination. And it's, you know, it's called National Center for Science and Innovation. But what we see here are almost cathedrals, you know, it's where science, as another North American architect, Wes Jones, said, science is our mythos. Well, that's what I seem to see here, that science is our mythos. But it takes the form of a culturally and historically identifiable mythos. It's something historical and historicist about this. It's not just science. It's not a typical representation of, you know, technology or industry. It's something else. There is stone here, you know, lots of stone. It's massive. It's the very opposite of what technology attempted to transform architecture into, meaning lighter and lighter and lighter with transparencies and so on. Think of Sir Richard Rogers, you know, or the engineer Peter Rice. Here is the monumentalization of the mythos of science and of whatever the word innovation might mean. We don't see any machine here. We don't see anything technological, yet it is a building destined to science and innovation in science. This also relates to what I wanted to show with Michael Hansmeyer. So there seems to be that the monumental is coming back, monumentality is coming back. Not any longer, we don't see any longer light, you know, steel structures and a lot of glass. Quite the opposite. We see a lot of opacity and, you know, heavy walls, heavy columns, sculptured columns. And look at the exterior. You know, nobody, you know, 50 years ago or even 30 years, well, I don't know, in postmodernism maybe, although this is not really postmodern in the sense we understood the word postmodern at the end of the 20th century. But nobody, you know, mid-century when the world was re-emerging from the tragedy called the Second World War, would envision such an architecture. You know, this is an architecture, it's almost a it's almost about the beauty of the ruins, but they are not really ruins, but there is that side to this architecture, that some kind of a melancholia. I actually see melancholia in his proposals. Is the melancholia of an artist, of an intellectual who contemplates the world not in rather naive terms. But on the other hand, maybe there is also some kind of a longing for some kind of Arcadia, you know, and the relationship between utopia and Arcadia is, on one hand, almost inevitable, and on the other hand, very problematic. Again, where do we see the busy highway with 6, lines of traffic on the left and 6 on the other, in the opposite direction? We see, more or less a wild nature, at least around the building, and then some paths, but nothing, this is a nature that is only partly domesticated. The section is schematic, and not very imposing. The plans, on the other hand, I mean, look at the section. It's almost historicist, but you look at the plan and you see here a fragmentation and a disorientation that has to do, at least in part, with deconstruction somehow. When you look at the plans, you would expect a different section. The section is very static. The plan is less so. It has some movement, and then the appearance, the external appearance of the building is almost a third reality, almost independent of. When you look at this image, you don't really expect these plans. And you also don't quite expect this very placid section. So anyway, he was exploring. And, but if it was built exactly what I see here, I wouldn't be uninterested to visit it. Now, we see a project done at Harvard, and I could be wrong. I couldn't verify, and I apologize. I plan to verify today. I just couldn't access the site where I found it. House in a field. And I'll just read the short text. Surface complexity, layer depth, and rich materiality provide an alternative to blankness or monolithic. Here, ornamental agency claims the space itself. Every single wall, floor, and ceiling spatial ornamentation fosters intimate rather than indifferent engagement with the home through controlled articulation, drawing one into the visual sensuousness of its unfolding depth. House in a field is a series of insertions as vertically staggered living spaces, catalyzed by visual richness, prompting the inhabitant to intimately move amongst the visceral immediacy of spatial ornament. Interesting association there, the two words, spatial ornament, meaning a three-dimensional ornament, structure that became ornament. The tactile personality of form, its articulated surface, combats the cold uniformity of standardization. And this is the project done at Harvard. You see here some floor plans, and I almost felt at first to say sections, but they're actually floor plans and some views. Maybe there is also, it's not just a certain aesthetics that seduces the students and the instructors as well these days in this direction. Maybe there is also certain software or certain softwares that allow them to easily produce such visions. But you do see, I think, a certain connection with this project and what Mark Foster Gage did. It's a house in a field, and it's a house Again, we don't see the highway. Those cars which are now in the mausoleum, the vertical mausoleum, are not any longer in the proximity of the cars, of the buildings. There are no parking lots. Instead, there is just this fog and somnolent nature that seems to precede maybe some awakening. Anyway, I thought of showing this project as well. Now we arrive, I think is the last work by him that I show today, this residential tower at West 57th Street in Manhattan that was on the cover of that Rizzoli book that was published with his work. And, what can we say? It's a very different kind of skyscraper. It's not just the typical skyscraper that has here and there some, minor interventions. No, this is a carved skyscraper. Look at those monumental balconies. They are heavy. They mimic heaviness. I like to imagine they are heavy, and the human silhouette is quite small. They are suspended there at appreciable height. Look at the building in the context of other tall buildings in Manhattan. It's almost an aberration, but it is possible to imagine that one day maybe we'll build something like this. When we'll have a large amount of workers who have nothing to do, and we can we'll have also an incredible technology that can, 3D print fragments of these things and so on. One thing is for sure, I think, that it is a return of the monumental and the return of a certain degree of figuration, a certain degree of need of narration, this comes as a surprise now at the peak of our modernity. Look how big this is. I mean, you see the human silhouettes. This is just the very top of the building. And I really think Mark Foster Gage is provoking us, and he makes us think, and he makes us ask questions. We might not have the answers, but it's important to ask questions. Where are we going? I don't know. Where do we come from? Who are we? To repeat the questions of Paul Gauguin. We keep pushing, the limits of culture and the limits of architecture. And this skyscraper shows various segments of it at various floors. They are not all the same. In a way, these fragments of this skyscraper tell us that ourselves, in our quest for a certain horizon of, I don't know, knowledge or, appropriateness of being in this world or on this world, is explored and questioned. And so I think I end here this first attempt to grasp his work. Maybe next year on his birthday again, we'll discuss it again and I'll amplify it. But I think he's an interesting architect, and if not for his answers, at least for his questions. Okay, so now I want to show you the very opposite of Mark Foster Gage, because it is her birthday today. And yes, she is not Alvar Aalto, but she was his wife, and she worked with him, and she probably even inspired him. And I will show 3 works that were mentioned in relation with her name. So ELISSA Aalto was born on the same day, but of course not the same year with Mark Foster Gage. And I think it's important to talk about her. And I like this contrast between the works of Mark Foster Gage and the works of the Aalto family, Alvar and ELISSA. She was the second wife of Alvar Aalto. His first wife died 3 years earlier in 1914. Well, I said 3 years, 3 years earlier. I was trying to refer to the year when they got married. I think in 1952 they got married, and his first wife died in 1949. So here she is. She was 25 years younger than him, and she survived him for 17 years more. So after his death, after the death of Alvar Aalto, she continued to work on their projects, and she even did some interventions in some buildings by Alvar Aalto that needed attention. So she graduated in architecture from the Helsinki University of Technology in 1949, and the same year she joined the office of Alvar Aalto. They married in 1952, so 3 years later, when she was 29 and he was 54, and they had no children together. At the time of their marriage, Aalto was involved in the construction of Säynätsalo town hall, and it was during that time that he acquired the nearby lakeside island plot where he built a summer home, the so-called experimental house. Now this townhouse is sublime, is one of his best works, and I'll show a good number of pictures of it. It's truly a beautiful work by Alvar Aalto. So it happened that I actually think, it's unwarranted my statement, but I believe when he met ELISSA, so he was, already lost his first wife. When he met her, he fell in love with her. And this love, I think, is shown in the works he did at that time. I'm talking about the town hall, and I'm talking about the experimental house, which he built for himself and his new wife, just as Stephen Hall did recently for himself and his very young wife. Stephen Hall became, I think for the first time, if I'm not wrong, a father at 72. And again, his wife, who is maybe 50 years younger, is pregnant again. So I don't know what Stephen Hall is doing, but he seems to be almost out of this world. Anyway, so she was involved. ELISSA Aalto was involved in all competition projects the office undertook. And after Alvar Aalto's death in 1976, she managed the office and completed the unfinished projects such as the Essen Opera House in Germany. She was also involved in alteration projects and the restoration of Aalto buildings, including the Rovaniemi Town Hall. She donated Aalto's drawings to the Alvar Aalto Foundation to make the material available for researchers. ELISSA Aalto died in 1994 and was buried in the Hietaniemi Cemetery in Helsinki with her husband. So it seems, she was buried with her husband, and her husband was not buried with his first wife. So his first wife remained alone. Okay, in Domus Eterna. So I don't know if I pronounce also Säynätsalo town hall. I love this work. I actually visited it, and we'll discuss it very soon. So this town hall is a multi-function building complex consisting of two main buildings organized around a centralized courtyard. And this is interesting because these two buildings that Aalto built when he was already together with ELISSA, they both have an inner courtyard, a centralized courtyard. I don't actually know of other projects by him or them that have this particularity. It's interesting. A U-shaped council chamber and town hall with administrative offices and a community library with flats. I don't know what this means. With library with and flats. Okay, the town hall was designed by Finnish architect Alvar Aalto for the municipality of Säynätsalo, merged with the municipality of another town that I would rather not pronounce the name of. In central Finland, Aalto received the commission after design contest in 1949. And the building was completed in December 1951. So he was already in love with ELISSA and involved with her. But, you know, what I read is kind of interesting. It seems Alvar Aalto participated in competition, sometimes with more than one project. And I read that sometimes he won the two projects, two prizes, the first prize and the second prize. I don't know if he also won a third prize, but just think of it, you know, it's so hard to win a competition. And he won two prizes because of he submitted two projects. Incredible. So the town hall is considered one of the most important buildings Aalto designed in his career. I would agree. It is, you know, a very noble way of building in a rather functionalist way, but in a lyrical way, even in a romantic way, is a beautiful building. And both outside and inside. And it is just in the right balance with the nature around it. It has everything, introversion, extroversion. It has centripetality, centrifugality. The materials are organic, but the geometry is abstract. Is a sum of conjunctions between opposites. Look at the modesty of these steps, which could also function as some kind of an outdoors amphitheater. You know, it's, you know, how many city halls in this world would accept such a ruralistic architecture in a way? But there is culture here, and let us not forget, Alvar Aalto said something very intriguing and provocative. Architecture belongs to culture, not to civilization. I was very surprised when I read this because I didn't expect from Alvar Aalto, who didn't, you know, talk extensively or write extensively, to be so abrupt. You know, why did he differentiate so clearly between culture and civilization? So architecture belongs to culture, not to civilization. Very interesting and powerful statement. But this building is truly one of the masterpieces of modern architecture. What else can I say? And he was then in love with ELISSA, you know, and I imagine, you know, inspired by this love, he was very inspired to do truly great architecture. Many of his buildings are excellent, but we'll show now two buildings that are great. This one and the experimental house, which he built for himself and her. So yes, Alvar Aalto was rejuvenated by this love for ELISSA. And it is shown again that love is a catalyst when it's genuine. So this is the view from the top. You know, how beautiful is that entrance through those, you know, look at that steps, you know, it's you would say it's almost a Baroque gesture, but it's not. It's a, you know, rural Baroque in a way, and it's very modest, but it has a discrete level. I know it sounds oxymoronic, of exuberance. You know, this is the magic of Alvar Aalto. You know, with small details, he's able to, well, not just details, you know, there is an ability he had and has to bring in unexpectedness in the context of a building where, you know, there is nothing forced. There is no, there is no artificiality, you know, no falseness actually. I have all the admiration for Alvar Aalto for this building and other buildings by him. And as I said, I don't know, I'm not an expert in Alvar Aalto, but from my knowledge now, I don't think there were other buildings with in a courtyard like here and the experimental house we are going to see next to this one. I mean, after this one. And you know, this building is hybrid. You know, it has a public function, is a city hall, but you also see, you know, a few apartments here. You know, so it's a combination of various functions, and it's done brilliantly. It really is. And inside as well, you know, that ceiling has a, you know, a masterpiece of architectural creativity. You'll see very soon. Um, and Aalto is really, I mean, let's compare Gage with Aalto. Now, we don't know, I don't know exactly what was the contribution of ELISSA. She worked with her husband. So, you know, I like to imagine, and there is a picture, and unfortunately I don't have it here, with the two of them discussing some drawings. So I imagine they collaborated. So to one extent, at least, it was a collaborative work. And but what I wanted to say is, you see the functions, he's able very discreetly to differentiate qualitatively between the spaces. This is a corridor, you know, and it is not emphasized more than it should be. Then we have the, you know, the public space, the big, you know, gathering place where things are different. Look at that ceiling, you know, it's so creative and so beautifully sculptural and yet functional, because his structure became ornament, and his ornament that became structure. It's, I think architecture is at its best when it achieves this, that when it breaks down the frontier between structure and ornament, when there is some kind of a capriciousness in the structure that confers to it some kind of artistic quality, sculptural quality, plastic quality, and yet it asserts itself as structure. Look at it. I think it's magnificent. You know, to bring sculpture and to bring structure at the level where it transcends its own definition and its own limitations. Very nice work. Now, the experimental house built for himself and ELISSA, where he experimented with all kinds of bricks on the facade. But there are other interesting things in this house. It's again, it's situated in a beautiful natural environment. What is very interesting here, in the middle of the courtyard, is a fireplace, or the place for the fire, almost like an altar under the open sky. And soon it will be the birthday of Gottfried Zemper, and I would like to take this opportunity to talk about him, because he saw the first house ever built was starting from a fire around which the hunters and the fishermen gathered one day in prehistory. And I don't know, it's something discreetly mythological here too, almost in this modern house. It is a modern house, but his intuitions, I think, transcend the limitations of chronos or chronology. Towards the outside, the house is white. Towards the inside is reddish because of the brick. Well, brick is also towards the outside. Interesting that I don't know if this was the original intention, and I should have investigated, but I am asking myself, why is it that the brick is painted in white towards the outside, but not towards the inside? When somehow you feel that maybe the opposite would have been more appropriate, because the inside courtyard is destined to domesticity, and the outside would have been a contrast with the green of the trees. I don't know, but it's a very fine building. And look at the original drawing, you know, with a hand lettering, and the plan very sensitively drawn. Um, so the entrance into the house is through here, and you'll see the door at the entrance. I guess this is a small guest house or a house for the, yeah, it's a guest house. Very nice plan. Now, from what I know, is the foundation. Maybe there is one also in Helsinki. It's part of the Aalto Foundation. But as opposed to the buildings by Frank Lloyd Wright, where the chimney was always at the center, not necessarily the geometrical center, but the factual center of the house, here, well, there is one here too, but it's eccentric and rather peripheric. But this is the fire that connects vertically with the gods. In a way, you know, it's the mythological fire is here. Here is the domestic. Here is the profane fire. Here is the sacred fire. If I am to be a little bit exalted, sorry about this. Okay, so great building. Bravo to him and to them. I can only say that it's probably the power of love that made this possible. The interior is, yeah, it's Scandinavian design, you know, whiteness and wood, clean, simplicity, functional, but so sensitive. And look at these bricks, you know. Again, let's not forget, we saw before some projects by Mark Foster Gage. We see now some works by Aalto, Alvar, and ELISSA to an extent. And, you know, what made the conception about architecture change so dramatically in around 50 years, 55 years, something like this, 60 years, maybe 65 now. You see, I'm amplifying a little bit because I'm trying to count. These were built in the 50s, you know, towards 60s. So yeah, let's say around 60 years ago. You know, it's like we lost interest in the simple gestures. You know, unless of course we find refuge in minimalism, but that's not what I'm referring to. Alvar Aalto was not a minimalist architect. Anyway, yeah, it is a lesson in architecture, this building and the previous building. And if one says, wait a minute, we are 67 years later, this world has no meaning for us, I think this is not so. We can learn a lot from Alvar Aalto. Okay, but it is true. It's hard not to be envious, you know, in the gentle sense of the word. You know, this was a beautiful place to live and work and love, and you know, what can we say? He deserved this luck because he was truly a great architect. You see the entrance door, and we'll see it also from the inside. If we didn't already pass by that, I know I have a picture with that door. Not that it's so relevant, but anyway, somehow this building makes me think a little bit of the duality of Tadao Ando, because Tadao Ando said, and I said this before, at one time declared that he wanted his architecture to be towards the outside, like Joseph Albers, meaning the Bauhaus artist who painted, you know, very luminous, Apollonic squares within squares, but inside to have the fire of Piranesi. Well, the word fire was added by me to be like Piranesi. Well, here we see the same in a way, whiteness towards the outside and redness, including that, you know, so-called altar in the center of the courtyard. So the fire is within, but towards the outside. And maybe this is a kind of a self-portrait for Alvar Aalto. I don't know about ELISSA. I imagine as a Scandinavian, as someone from the north, he was rather reticent and discreet towards the outside, but this didn't mean that he didn't have a fire within, just like this house. In fact, I met someone in the United States who worked for and with Aalto, and he told me that he was drinking rather heavily. So if the alcohol didn't provoke that fire, or the other way, if he didn't extinguish it, it certainly testified that he had a tumultuous nature within. Now, here are some architects, I imagine, visiting the foundation and having fun around the building. It is after all, a building by Aalto. But I would also add ELISSA. You know, it's impossible for me to believe that, you know, he loved her. And, you know, this, even if it was drawn by his hand, maybe, although from what I understood, and you read it together with me, she was responsible for competitions. So she worked with him. She was his hand maybe sometimes in projects. So I imagine she had an impact on this project as well, a creative one. Yes, beautiful forest and a great building. Yeah, this is the image, which is not really so relevant. And I like to imagine that that rug was not placed there by Aalto, and maybe not even by ELISSA. I don't know. It seems to be a little bit off, but I could be wrong. It's still discreet. It's still, you know, Nordic reticence. But anyway, so. And I think now we go to, soon we'll go to the third building, the Essen Opera House in Germany, which she completed by herself because he already died. But I have more pictures with this great building. Okay, we arrived at Essen. So he died 17 years before she died. And in those 70 years, she did a lot of works that her office, their office, continued to be involved with. And this is the building at Essen. I find it a little bit colder than the previous two buildings, maybe because I don't see that brick that I like so much, but it's a different city, it's a different country, it's something else. It's still an Aalto building, maybe Alvar plus ELISSA building. It was built, and you know, she was around 50 when he died, and you know, I imagine it wasn't so easy, you know, to carry on. You know, on one hand, you know, the inevitable suffering because of his death. On the other hand, the responsibility of these big projects, which had to be, you know, finalized. But she succeeded. Okay, and now if you want, I don't know if you want, I could show you quickly Hansmeyer, Michael Hansmeyer, because he connects with Mark Foster Gage. And with this, I will end the presentation today. So Michael Hansmeyer, he is about the same age, I imagine, in his 40s, and he teaches at the HETH in Zurich, and he's a researcher there. I understood he initially was a banker, but somehow he arrived at architecture. This is the man, and here he is at the same conference that you saw pictures of, or a picture with from Mark Foster Gage. And this is what he does. You know, he brings back the architectural order, you know, not the Greek orders. These are, and maybe the word order or orders is not really, you know, asked for, but how else to name them? They are columns. They are columns, highly ornamental and 3D printed and generated using very sophisticated, you know, programs, scripting, programming, softwares. And you know, I find it again amazing that at the beginning of the 21st century, you know, when we move beyond postmodernism in a way, we seem to still be tempted by certain things from the past, and you know, like an embroidered architecture, you know, the return of the ornament, which in itself is a provocative return, because modernity in general was obsessed with structure and the banishment of ornament. But look at it here. We are talking about, you know, in a way, cutting edge architecture, researchers, explorers, pioneers of a new architecture, exploring exactly the potential of what was banished, the return of the repressed, and that is the ornament. This is what Gage did and does, and this is what Hansmeyer did and does. Look at this woven column. You know, it's complicated. You would wonder, why didn't he just make a simple, banal cylinder? Well, you know, yesterday actually I discovered, and I'm sorry I don't have here the name, an extremely interesting French mathematician, apparently an extremely accomplished mathematician, very, very exotic in his way of dressing himself, and he received a doctor honoris causa. He's still young, and the one who introduced him said something like this, that the effort is beautiful exactly because it is difficult. So, you know, yeah, I think a column that is so-called complicated has a richness and a potential beauty, maybe in part because of it. The difficulties, you know, inherent in its creation. But one thing is for sure: the world is not happy any longer. At least some of the world, or some part of the world. Certain people like to explore other things besides the, you know, the dogmatic, you know, recommendations of what modernism apparently means. And here you'll see a dog. I always mention this dog when I make this presentation, because I like the solemnity of the dog near this, you know, intricate column. And here we see a colleague of Hansmeyer, probably himself an architect at TH in Zurich. And I love these people because they are explorers, they are pioneers, they open up new vistas, new road, you know, they explore new kinds of architecture and new kinds of culture. So here Hansmeyer is telling us unseen objects that await us. There are unseen objects that await us if we as architects begin to think about designing not the object, but a process to generate objects. And by the way of this, last year I saw at the Institute of Architecture in Vienna a diploma work by an architect who actually didn't design anything except a software that would make a computer design. So what actually we saw was produced by a computer which was acting in the name of a software created by the student. So in a way, he created a process which generated the objects and not designed the object per se. Here is not relevant, nor André Malraux. Sorry, we come back to Hansmeyer and his funambulesque visions for architecture that make us reconsider our modernistic, simplistic paradigms. You can see he's not far away from Mark Foster Gage. These, I call these, I mean, these erosions, you know, it's a carved architecture. or fragments of architecture, entities, architectural entities. But the erosion itself is an important part of what we see. In the case of Carlos Carpa, I use the expression positive erosions, which is an oxymoronic expression. Here, I don't know if I would call it positive erosions, but I see this, you know, like embroidered erosions, maybe. I go quickly because we are towards the end of our presentation, and this is more like, you know, an informative material, maybe for a future discussion, because I do think it's important to discuss about the relationship between structure and ornament, you know, and these examples, Gage and Hansmeyer, you know, we cannot ignore them. They happen in our time. They are part of our present. And as such, we cannot ignore them. The traditional notion of an architect having a vision of a building and then drawing it either on paper or on a computer and then constructing it, it isn't really how architecture works. And in reality, the computer has a lot of influence on design. I agree with him. Unfortunately, many people use the computer just in order to make the drawings more accurate or more rigorous. But no, the computer could actually influence the very specificity, the essence, the creative essence of the work. If we can think about not the object, but the process of creating the object, in short, we have no constraints. We have processes in our hands that allow us to create structures at all scales that at one point we couldn't even have dreamt of. Here he is near his columns. Now I'll show you some works because in a way nothing is new in the world. This is Hindu architecture. And here we see columns that, yes, were done without 3D printing, but in their essence, they are not very different from what Hansmeyer does, and even aesthetically. So, you know, again, the novelty is not often what it appears to be. Look, this you could almost say was produced by Hansmeyer, but it was not. It's Hindu architecture, and they have a lot of it. Now, whatever Adolf Loos might have said, I'm not so sure, you know, the banishment of ornament is truly an expression of how civilized a society is. And after all, in Vienna, there are plenty of graffitis and there are plenty of tattoo shops, you know, so the Viennese still tattoo themselves, although Loos said that a more civilized country, less graffiti and less tattoos and so on. It's not true at all. Vienna is very civilized. In fact, it's the most livable city in the world, or at least it was last year and 2 years ago. But there are tattoo shops. I found them. I even photographed them, and they have graffitis too. So Loos was not quite correct, with all due respect. Okay, we are still in India, and we'll return to Hansmeyer soon, just to show that there is a continuum, a cultural continuum on the spiral of time, that we are not as dislocated as we might think we are. No.
Dan?
Yes.
This is Ranakpur temple. This is near Ahmedabad, and Louis Kahn had gone to see this temple when he was designing IIM. Like the trustees of IIM Ahmedabad, they send him to see this temple. It's actually a very huge temple with 1444 columns, and it's so huge that they have not managed to complete it fully. Like many of the carvings and all are incomplete, a little bit incomplete. I'll do a presentation on this temple, and Louis Kahn was very impressed by the way the light comes from the top floors into the temple. That's what he's written about this temple.
I'm very happy to hear your voice, Vatsal. How do you feel?
I feel nice. It's almost 1 week since we all tested COVID negative. So now we are out of Corona, but there is this still this trauma of those 14, 15 days uh,
Yes,
hanging.
I understand,
Hanging.
but I'm sure you and your family will be fine. Please let me know,
Yes.
Vatsal, because I don't want to be wrong, and I perhaps was already wrong. This is a Hindu temple, or
This is a Jain temple.
yes, that's what I thought of. And the
Yes.
previous ones as well.
Yeah. If you go back a few slides, I can tell you. This is all Ranakpur temple,
Yes.
which is a huge temple in terms of floor area. It is a huge temple with 1444 columns, and a lot of French tourists come to see this temple. I don't know. It's very popular with them. If I describe these columns, they have this a square shape, which with the corners they are kind of I don't know how to explain it, striated or broken down into further corners. And these columns they have layers. Like if you zoom down, there is a layer of elephants at the bottom. Then there is a layer of those uh, uh, lion faces and abstracted lion faces, and each of these columns have a different carving. That's typically a Hindu temple. They never repeat the design. If you zoom two columns, you will see that the molding levels are same, but the carving is different. If you can go back a few slides, I can explain each of them. This is a South Indian temple. Sorry, the one after this. Yeah, this is a South Indian temple, and these columns, they believe they had some instruments like a lathe, because this is impossible to carve with hands. So they still don't know what technology was used in carving these columns. This is a South Indian temple. Uh, if you go back, I can, if there is time and people are interested. Uh, this is a circumambulatory path. In the center, there's this deity, and there is a this photo is of a circumambulatory path around that main shrine, which is a little dark because it is like then again housed in another structure. So these are some sculptures in that area. If you, yeah, you can see the person, he's moving in that. You can see a figure, I think, here.
Yes.
He's moving in between that. This is Delwara Abu. This is near Ahmedabad, around 5-6 hours drive. It's on a mountain, and there's a giant temple, and it has such exquisite carving that they said that uh, the artisans were paid according to the um, amount of powder they would extract from that rock. I mean, the way they would, the more intricate they would carve, they were paid more. And this is all in white marble. And this marble is also like excavated near Ahmedabad. Towards the north of Ahmedabad, we have white marble and green marble mines, which is very similar to the marble in Italy. The green and white marble you find in Italy, it's quite similar to that. And these are all white marble temples from the inside. Outside, they are very plain. Uh, yeah, again, this is Abu. This is a modern temple. This is of the Swaminarayan sect. They have this temple in USA also. They have one in UK, London, Neasden. And it's similarly carved in white marble, which is like excavated from India and sent there. I'd been to the one in London. Yeah, yeah, that's about it. Thanks, Dan.
No, thank you, Vatsal. I look forward to your presentation about this architecture when you are ready to make it. Thank you. So again, you know, between Hansmeyer and what we see here is not really such a long distance. It is interesting that an European, you know, is exploring now ways of bringing back to architecture something that was done in other cultures, in another faith system, you know, and a while ago. So who would have thought, no? Who would have thought that after the 5 classical orders, here we are in the 21st century, you know, at the peak of our technology, exploring an architecture that somehow, you know, is about maybe the 6th order or so, or the 7th order, I don't know. Are they 5 or 6 classical? I guess 5. Yeah. So interesting, you know, when you apply the newest technology to preoccupations which situate you on the spiral of time, you are both connected with a, you know, sometimes a remote past, and also asserting the specificities of your time. And I think that you have the best of both worlds. You are individualizing your position, personalizing it, and at the same time, you are part of a continuum. And, you know, bravo to Hansmeyer. So he's using, you know, mathematics, scripting, programming, but the imagination at play is of a surreal character, I would say. Digital grotesque, a 3D printed room. He talks about it at this TED conference. And here there are the workers assembling the parts of one of his creations. Anyway, I do think that there is material for thought here. Mark Foster Gage and Hansmeyer, they launch towards us a provocation, indeed. The thing is, we cannot live creatively without joy, and joy necessitates new territories and explorations. We need to be pioneers and, you know, to discover other things, even if these so-called other things have echoes in other places and other times. It's fine. But look, you know, he uses digital technologies to produce something that made me think of going to India to find parallels. And, you know, why not? Computational architecture, gross titanium, and this has nothing to do with Hansmeyer. Sorry, I don't know why I incorporated this in the presentation. Maybe just to show the labyrinthical, you know, preoccupations today. Even in the case of a table, a large-scale, impeccably intricate 3D printed sculpture made out of silica, sands, and binder by Michael Hansmeyer and Benjamin Dillenburger as part of the digital grotesque. I don't know very well. I mean, I do on one hand, but on the other hand, there is something that unsettles me about the word grotesque. You see here 2 roads. Well, one is a road, clearly, the one on the right, and then on the left, we see, you know, mud and misery. So if we had no bias, he says, if we had no preconceptions, what kind of forms could we design? And I think going through the mud, going through the unexplored territory is the way to go towards creativity. If you take the already traced and asphalted road, it will be very comfortable, but you create nothing. It's the darkness and the misery on the left that is the way towards creativity. Here he had an exhibition at Centre Georges Pompidou in Paris, and involves creating an algorithm to design the structure of the Doric column in the case of this design biennial installation. And it moves me, this intricate relationship between mathematics, technology, new forms of artistic expression is fine. You truly have the meeting between art and science. This is, I don't know, another website about his works. You can find many references to him and about his works on the web. And a complex world of forms arises at multiple scales between ornament and structure, between order and chaos, foreign and yet familiar, a digital grotesque. And I am approaching the end of this presentation, this exploration in the field of provocations by Mark Foster Gage, and across the ocean towards Europe, Michael Hansmeyer. Well, to be honest with you, I didn't see too many people caressing a white, plain, bare wall. But here you see, because it's the tactility involved, is the pleasure of discovering, of touching a certain relief. So we should perhaps reconsider a little bit the banality of our ubiquitous white walls in the so-called modern architecture. Machineries and powder and all kinds of materials and even a mask, but not because of COVID. All of these things, coming together in order to externalize and give form, a concrete form to the dream of someone, a former banker, if you can believe it. Anyway, but after all, even Paul Gauguin, I mentioned earlier, was initially a banker, and then he turned his back on banking and dedicated himself fully to painting. Okay, so that's it. We saw already Mark Foster Gage. So I thank you, and